All right. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here at Porcfest 20. This feels like such a historic event. First of all, I can't even believe, we've been around for 20 years. We've been doing this for 20 years. And this 20th year is genuinely special. We're seeing all these amazing thinkers, people who have a sense of decency in the world, are coming to us because we need to be having open and honest conversations in order to get to the truth and in order to heal the world. So it's my deep, deep honor to welcome Larry Elder here to Porcfest. Larry.
Carla, thank you for not calling me the black face of white supremacy.
Not yet.
So far, so good.
Well, I am an African American because I grew up in South Africa and immigrated, and I'm an American citizen. So I feel your pain with the name calling
you and Elon Musk are really African Americans.
Right. Yeah, truly. Mm-hmm. So Larry, tell me, what is the craziest thing you've heard about Porcfest?
That you've been around 25 years. The goal is to attract people to come here, and then people are complaining that people have come here and jacked up the prices of housing. You can't have it both ways. It's called supply and demand.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. You heard it here
That's right.
first. So Larry, just for the folks back home and for people who will be watching this later, tell us just briefly about your race. We don't really want to stump here, and in fact, just for the folks who are here, what we will be doing is I will be asking Larry the same questions as I asked Kennedy yesterday. I would like these questions to sort of become the standard for what we're discussing in New Hampshire, because we're interested in the things we're interested in. And we're interested in things like peace and true justice, and really trying to, again, right these wrongs through dialogue and non-aggression. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about your race, where it's going, what's up, and how I can convince you to move.
Well, the reason I'm running is because I believe there are so many people, Carla, who would not vote for 45 if the man walked on water. In fact, if he did, they'd accuse him of not being able to swim. Now, I have no idea what to do about Trump derangement syndrome, because I think most of it is unfair. But until somebody develops a vaccine, we've got a problem. And that problem is called electability. And what I've asked people to do is ask yourself, have you lost friends because of Donald Trump? I've had 3 friends I've known for 40 years apiece. We can't talk anymore because of Donald Trump. Are you walking on eggshells at work because of Donald Trump? Do you have strained relations with family members and relatives because of Donald Trump? If the answer is yes, Houston, we've got a problem. And I think at some point, the Republicans are going to realize that we need to rally behind a candidate whose last name is other than Trump, but for whom a sufficient number of swing voters in swing states can vote so we can win in November 2024, because it's crucial that we do that.
All right. Yeah. So sort of differentiating yourself there from Trump. Can I ask, because we have so many presidential candidates who are here. I mean, it's really fascinating, and from sort of unknowns. In fact, Aaron Day, who is a Free Stater, he served on the board at one stage of the Free State Project. He's running sort of on an anti-central bank digital currency platform. He's a smart Bitcoin guy, so he's like out there, right? But then we are getting these bigger names and these people who have been in the game a long time who are coming here. Did you feel like you had to come talk to, as New Hampshire's the first in the primary?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm here. My issues have to do with borders, have to do with crime, have to do with inflation, the fact that there's been a war on oil and gas. We need school choice. We have 13 public high schools in Baltimore, I kid you not, Carla, where 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. 0%. And there are 53 public schools in Chicago. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Nationwide, 85% of black 8th graders, these are 13-year-old black kids, can neither do math nor read at grade level. Half can't even do basic reading, which means a substantial percentage of black kids in our country are functionally illiterate. You cannot have a republic when you have a large percentage of people who can't read, think, reason. They can be manipulated, they respond to emotion, and that can undermine our country. So that's why really I'm running. So some of the issues you're going to talk to me about. I haven't thought as deeply about them as some of the other candidates have, but I'm happy to answer the question. But that's why I'm here.
And of course, and honestly, afterwards from yesterday, people are like, wow, I can't believe you asked those questions. And it never occurred to me that they were like cutting edge or like too much or anything like that. I was just like, these are the conversations we're having here. These are the things that matter to us.
Can I say one more quick thing before you get into
Launch
that?
in.
There's this lie that America is systemically racist. It's got to stop.
Okay.
It's got to stop. And I blame Obama for starting a lot of this stuff. When he was elected in 2008, he walked into the Oval Office with a 70% approval rating, even though he got elected with just 52% of the vote. How is it that 18% who didn't vote for him suddenly said, I support this guy? It wasn't because they wanted their taxes raised. It wasn't because they wanted government to be expanded more in health care. It's because people said, you know what, at the very least, he'll stop the nonsense about America being systemically racist.
Right.
So the polls show that both blacks and whites thought race relations would get better. When he left, both blacks and whites thought race relations got worse. Why? For 8 years, the man played the race card over and over and over again, from the Cambridge police acted stupidly, to if I had a son, he looked like Trayvon, to saying racism is in America's DNA, whatever that means, to embracing Black Lives Matter, to invoking Ferguson, even though Michael Brown did not have his hands up, did not say don't shoot. He had Al Sharpton in the White House over 70 times.
Wow.
Why? Not because he truly believes that America is systemically racist. He knows it's not.
Right. He's the president of the country.
How do you go to Punahou and then go to Occidental for first 2 years for college, then finish up at Columbia, then go to Harvard, become president of the Harvard Law Review, move to Chicago, run for state senate, get elected, run for U.S. Senate, get elected, and then run for president and get elected? How does that happen in a systemically racist country? He knows it's BS, but he says it because he wants black people to be angry, so they go in there like lemmings and pull that lever for the Democratic Party to the tune of 95%, and white guilty liberals the same way.
Yeah, those Karens, man.
Otherwise, he cannot win. Yeah, otherwise
he
cannot win. And this calling the police systemically racist has caused something called the Ferguson effect, Carla, or the George Floyd effect. Cops pull back. When they pull back, bad guys know it. And when you lower the chance of a bad guy being caught, being convicted, being incarcerated, crime goes up. And the people who are hurt most by this excess crime are the very black and brown people on the left claim that they care about.
Right.
And finally, I want to talk about the epidemic during the campaign, the epidemic of fatherlessness.
Yeah, that's a big one.
In 1965, 25% of black kids entered the world without a father in the home married to the mother.
25%.
Now that number is 70%.
What?
70%. 25% of white kids today enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. 70% of Hispanic kids, 50% of Hispanic kids, 40% of all American kids do. And the stats are clear. When you are raised without a dad, you are 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. What's happened? With the welfare state, which I'll be talking about later on, we've incentivized women to marry the government. We've incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. So those are the kinds of things I'm going to be talking about during the campaign.
Okay, fantastic. And of course, for everyone here at 3 o'clock down in the pavilion is the real big keynote. So it's very exciting. I love that married the government. I talk about statism a lot as almost a religion. Like people have replaced it, their God with the God of government.
It's really hurting the country, and I don't think people realize it. And by the way, to get me up there on the debate stage in Milwaukee, I need to have 40,000 individual donations.
Okay.
The donation can be as small as $1. So you go to my website, elderforpresident.com, throw something in the tip jar, get me up there in that debate, and watch what I say. Game on, hold my beer.
And love it. And honestly, everyone in this room should go donate $1. It's $1 to really make sure that we're putting voices out there who are speaking about the ideas that are actually important. This country is going down the tubes, and we still possibly have a fighting chance. Except here in New Hampshire, we Free Staters do not believe we can reform the federal government. I don't mean to insult you, but but genuinely, we just, you know, I moved 15 years ago because I looked at the landscape and I was like, at least for me, and I believe in human action, I only believe I can do what I can do. I was like, I can't turn DC's ship around, but I was like, where could I do it? So here is where we think we can do it. So I'm going to start with the hardest question first, and then we'll work our way back. But I did also ask Bobby Kennedy this yesterday. In the event that you become president of the United States.
Such negativity, Carla. You mean when?
All right, sorry, we will cut for a new clip.
I'll accuse you of systemic racism. I will play the race card. I have no shame. You mean when?
Sorry, sir. I retract my $1. Just
Carla,
do it if it's voluntary.
Carla, when Tim Scott got into the race, I get a phone call from a bunch of reporters, and they said, Larry, you and Tim Scott are both black Republicans. What distinguishes you from Tim Scott? I said, in 2016, when Donald Trump decided to run, did you call him up and say, Donald, you both are white Republicans. What distinguishes you from Jeb Bush? And they went, my bad. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's like when the reporters call me and they're like, it's a only white male movement. And I'm like, I've been running it forever and I'm an African American woman. Like, what?
Yeah.
All right, so when
Thank you
become president, if we use democratic processes within the state of New Hampshire, so a states' rights process, to peacefully declare independence from the federal government, would you send in troops? Would you use violence to keep us in the Union?
You know, I have a really good friend named Walter Williams. He's an economist. And he's written extensively about the Civil War. And his argument is, he's happened to be black, his argument is that the South should have been allowed to secede.
Yeah.
And that had the South seceded, we would have avoided 600,000 deaths, both sides, and millions of injuries, and eventually slavery would have imploded on its own accord because of economic reasons, because of moral reasons. It may have taken longer, but we would have done so without this kind of bloodshed. I have no idea what kind of world we would have had Lincoln not stopped the South from seceding, but it certainly is something that we ought to be thinking about. It's not a crazy idea.
Okay. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
It's not a crazy idea. We'll take it. Thank you.
I think the other 49 states want California to secede from the Union.
Yeah. And honestly, we had a panel here last year where we had, and this made the media's heads explode, we had the Texas secessionist movement, we had the California secessionist movement, so that's right and left. We had the New Hampshire exit New Hampshire secessionist movement, and that's sort of black and gold, and libertarian, right? And the media was just like, wait, what? Now we can't play the race card. We can't play the left-right card. We don't know what to do. Now we have to talk about the idea of it.
I have been asked also about term limits.
Yes.
And the founder of the Cato Institute, one of the biggest libertarian think tanks, is a guy named Ed Crane. He's a friend of mine. And I disagreed with him about that. I thought you guys were all about freedom. And if somebody wants to vote for somebody over and over and over again, particularly if the person is young and vigorous, let's suppose a young, vigorous Ronald Reagan became president, and he was in his 40s or late 40s when he finished his second term. We would be prevented from voting for him? And I said, now I'd be in favor of term limits for voters. After you vote Democrat 2 or 3 times, you've lost your right to vote. I'm joking. Headline, Elder wants term limits for voters.
I know we spoke about this briefly before the discussion here started, but I always bring up Russ Ulbricht. He's the founder of Silk Road. He is someone who has, been really sandbagged and railroaded by the federal government, and he has a double life sentence without the chance of parole. Yesterday, Bobby Kennedy did say he would at least look into it. He kind of sidestepped it a little bit, but he did say he would look into it, and if they had used the case really to as an example to stop other people from adopting crypto or to trying to reduce the harm of the drug war. In those cases, he would be willing to look at clemency. As president, What's your outlook?
I have the same position. Not too much pressure. His mom is right there looking at me. A double life sentence seems awfully severe for what he did. What he was trying to do is use free market to operate a digital website, a digital marketplace, and it seems to me philosophically there's nothing wrong with that. What he was accused of is allowing or looking the other way while people were selling drugs, selling guns, and other kinds of things. So I would absolutely look at that case and make a determination. I know that Trump looked at it near the end of his term, and he considered commuting his sentence and decided not to do it. But I'll take a look at it, absolutely.
And that's really interesting because I know, thank you, because, everyone should look at it, and everyone who hasn't already, who's watching this, can support Ross by just going to the petition and signing up. There are over 560,000 people who support this, and I think if we can just make it an issue, I don't. People have said I'm overstating it, but I see it very similar to the struggle of Nelson Mandela, actually, right?
I know a lot of libertarians feel very strongly about this.
Yeah.
But another issue, though, on the same thing is the two-tiered criminal justice system that we have. I mean, Donald Trump is being indicted for documents. Joe Biden has had documents in 4 or 5 different places, including documents from when he was in the Senate, and he got him out of a SCIF. A SCIF is an area that's secured. You're not supposed to take documents in or out or even take notes. How do you inadvertently take documents out of a SCIF? And I know he has a special counsel investigating, but so far no charges.
Yeah,
and Hillary clearly violated the Espionage Act with the server on which he sent and received classified information. And then James Comey does his big presentation. At the very end of it, he says, yeah, but she lacked the intent. Well, the specific part of the law that she allegedly violated did not even require intent.
Right.
Any more than if you're a drunk driver and you kill somebody, you can say, well, I didn't mean to kill him. Of course you didn't. But intent is implied. And so we have a two-tiered justice system, and it's absolutely outrageous.
And it's two-tiered not in a systemic racist way. It's two-tiered in a establishment elite, like a banana republic way. This is the frustration. Like, we are seeing the corruption blatantly, like brazenly. It is shocking to me. Even this Biden, the son.
And this corruption, we complain about 2020. And if you say 2020 was stolen, you're, of course, a nutcase and you're a conspiracy theorist.
Well, welcome to the club.
Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all use COVID as a means to undermine, water down requirements to make sure voting was secure. In 40,000 votes would have swung the election clearly in favor of Donald Trump. Those are 3 states alone. And then we had the 2.5-year collusion nonsense that undermined his ratings. And then we had the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story.
So that's where I caught my first genuine suppression ban.
The FBI had that laptop from December 2019 and had the computer store repairman not made a copy. We never would have even known about it. And then we find out that Twitter worked with the DOJ to suppress this story. And there was a study done that looked at swing voters in swing states. 17% of these voters who voted for Joe Biden said they would not have voted for him had they known about this story.
So
there are all sorts of things. And then you have $419.5 million of Zuckerberg money spent to get out the Democrat turnout. And that alone, so many things happen that are outrageous. But we say this, we're called election deniers, and we are undermining the foundation of our republic. Meanwhile, Hillary, for 4 years, referred to Donald Trump as illegitimate, said the election was stolen.
Yes.
The successor of Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, referred to Trump as illegitimate. Jimmy Carter claimed that the Russians put him there. Obama's DOJ testified under oath that the Russians tried to change vote tallies. They tried, but they failed to change a single vote tally. 2/3 of Democrats believe that they did. He also said, I have no idea whether or not the Russian interference, and there was interference, altered the outcome of the election. I'd have to have a world where there was interference, one where there wasn't. Compare the two. I can't do that, so I don't know. But there was a big study done by NYU, and they said the Russian interference was so small as to be barely measurable. 78% of Democrats, however, believe that the Russian interference, quote, altered the outcome of the election, according to Gallup. In other words, more Democrats believe that 2016 was stolen. We feel that way about 2020.
Right.
But nobody called Hillary an election denier when she said that.
No, of course.
Nobody called Hakeem Jeffries. Nobody called John Lewis. They all said it. I just thought they were sore losers who had a First Amendment right to complain. We complain and we're called election deniers. This is the double standard that the media has allowed.
It's even worse than that. I was listening to a Twitter Spaces the other day, and so these are experts who will get on a, sort of a virtual panel, and in it was a expert on all the censorship that's going on, and this lady said that the hashtag Trump 2024 was suppressed and shadow banned on Twitter in 2019. Yes. And I was like, what? If we can pull that thread and prove it, then you start to make a story that is understandable to the average person about what's happening.
It has been proved. After Elon Musk bought Twitter and exposed the Twitter files, we're finding out about all the suppression. And I know from my own Twitter account, I might have averaged a couple hundred new followers per day. Elon Musk announced his purchase. Now I'm getting 2,000 per day. Wow. It was like overnight. I have other friends who are also conservative. Same thing happened to them.
Okay.
And the suppression of any kind of dissent about COVID.
I mean, there were rational people that were considered to be professional, well-regarded people who signed the so-called Great Barrington Declaration. Yep.
And they said
a lot of them are here,
it shouldn't be shut down. Older people should be protected. Outside of that, everybody else should be able to go to work. And it was ignored, it was suppressed, and the people that signed it were called fringe epidemiologists, even though the day before they were called esteemed epidemiologists.
Oh, yeah.
And so shutting down, of course, caused a whole learning loss, which is going to translate into earnings loss over the course of these kids' lifetime. There was higher depression. There was higher suicide. There were higher domestic violence. All this stuff happened as a result of this. And in California, where I am, the state was shut down in a more severe way than any other state.
Yeah,
and a third of all small restaurants in California are now gone forever.
Yeah,
and most of them owned by black and brown people, the people that people on the left claim that they care about. Our test scores in California are near the bottom, and these kids lost a whole year or two of learning. It's just completely outrageous what happened under Gavin Newsom, which is why I try to unseat him.
Yeah, no, that Gavin Newsom's bad news. Bad Newsom. Yeah. All right, I want to get all my questions in here, so I want to make sure we talk a little bit about what I think the moment of Porcfest is, and of what we're doing here in New Hampshire is basically reclaiming and building the modern peace movement, right? A fundamental part of our philosophy, or at least my philosophy, and I hope other people agree, is the non-aggression principle, right? Like, I don't hurt you, you don't hurt me. Let's use our words to solve our differences, unless you're being like a supremely bad guy in the moment, and then I'm gonna shoot you. Right. That's pretty much our philosophy, I think, in a nutshell. So, and it's so hard for people to wrap their heads around. You know, I talk to journalists, and I try and reduce things to sort of bumper stickers. I think we can learn a lot from messaging by doing that, and that is candidly something Trump did successfully. Fake news, deep state, right? These are words we can adopt to use it in a greater sense, right? So as the peace movement, we're curious as president, how would you, one, reduce the footprint of soldiers overseas? And then once we talk about that a little bit, we have a lot of activists here in New Hampshire who are working on Defend the Guard. Are you familiar with that legislation? So it's federal legislation, but they're doing it, well, actually, no, it's on a state level. So they're introducing a bill that says Congress hasn't declared war since World War II. That's right. That's their job. Like, we can't go to war and spend trillions of dollars while also somehow liquidating, how much have they lost now? Like 8 trillion, I think, is the last number, with the 2 and the 6. So so the Defend the Guard would say, you can't send our state's National Guard overseas to fight a war unless you declare war like you're supposed to.
Broad strokes. I believe in peace through strength rather than the other way around, which is what the Democrats believe in. I was at an airport, this is when Trump was running in 2020, and I was speaking to a prison chaplain, a chaplain in the military, and he didn't vote for Trump in 2016. He said, my son is in special operations, and my son tells me that all of the troops feel safer because of Donald Trump. He said, our enemies are scared bleatless because of Donald Trump. And he says, now I'm going to support him. There were no new wars under Donald Trump.
Good.
And I believe that one of the reasons is because the rest of our enemies were scared to death of him. And so, we have enemies. One of my favorite shows was 24. And there was a scene between William Devane, the guy that sells the gold stuff on TV. He played Secretary of State, and he had a son who's an anti-war activist. And they were about ready to sign on some new big ticket military arms. And the son was opposed to it and went to an anti-military arms peace rally. And so the son and the father are arguing. And William Devane said, "Oh, spare me your 5th grade Michael Moore logic. America has enemies. We do have enemies." And Carla, absolutely, it would be a wonderful world if I don't mess with you, you don't mess with me, I don't aggress against you, you don't aggress against me. But unfortunately, there are people in the world and throughout history that don't listen to that. And you have to deal with them. So you have to have a military. Do we need to have all these military installations all over the world, even all over our country? No, we don't. It can be much smaller. But the idea that somehow, some way, we can have a world where there's no war whatsoever because other people will mind their business, we mind ours, to me is naive.
Oh, you know what's not naive? How about we just arm every man and woman in the world? What would that look like? It'd be a lot of violence for probably 5 years, and then things will look pretty good.
I have a friend who's Nigerian, and he told me that he was at work once, and somebody said, "Why is it that you guys have military coups every so often?" And he said, "Because unlike America, we're not allowed to have arms."
Yep, It really is, which sort of leads me into the next...
Could I just say something too about that?
Sorry, go ahead, of course.
I was asked about Gavin Newsom wants to amend the Second Amendment. You heard about that?
Yep.
He wants a new amendment to raise the age at which you can buy a gun, to end the so-called gun show loophole, universal background checks, outlaw so-called assault weapons with no definition of what that is.
Of course.
One, he is implying that the laws that we have in California, because we have all those laws, are against the Second Amendment. Why do you need to amend it if you already have these laws? Secondly, you guys know the purpose behind the Second Amendment is to present tyranny against government. Now, for 4 years, what have we heard? Donald Trump is Hitler. Donald Trump is Nazi. Donald Trump is Stalin. Donald Trump is Mussolini. If you really believe that, wouldn't you want more citizens to have arms rather than fewer of them?
Yes.
Either you're being a demagogue by saying that, or you have no blooming idea of the purpose behind the Second Amendment. Either one, it's bad.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, because New Hampshire's constitutional carry
I know. I'm
state.
walking around here. I'm seeing people packing heat. I never felt more comfortable.
It's fantastic. We'll leave that one here. And my thought came full circle.
The other thing about all of this, too, whenever there's a school shooting, and it's always tragic, it's always, what more gun control law can we pass? I can't think of a single gun control law that would have stopped any of these mass shootings. Several of them have been stopped by an armed citizen who had a permit to carry concealed. And nobody seems to talk, even on Fox, about how many Americans are alive every year because somebody was able to get a gun, use a gun, often just brandishing it to break off an attack. And one estimate puts the numbers at 1.25 million times every single year Americans use a gun to prevent a crime. Now, the CDC doesn't do any original research on this, but Obama ordered them to look at existing research. And they wrote back, at the very least, there's one defensive use of a firearm for every illegal use. And then they talked about the other studies that show it puts as high as almost 2.5 million times every single year. But no one talks about that. Guns have benefits, guns also have costs.
Of course.
And they talk about the cost, they don't talk about the benefits.
Right, and then it's up to us, right? And that's just not a conversation they want to have. And that was really where free speech started to get pressed on social media, sort of before the censoring that happened, right? You weren't allowed to sell guns anymore, post photos with guns, that kind of stuff.
And
so
the police,
that was like a pre-censor.
the police job is not to stop crime. It's all wonderful if they can, but you can't sue them for not being around. And virtually every big city police department now has fewer officers than they want, ideally, because officers are quitting because they're being accused of systemic racism. They're retiring. They're transferring to smaller departments. My beloved Aunt Maggie just got mugged Somebody put a gun in her face on Saturday.
Wow.
She was going to Bible study, stole her purse, and stole her Bible. Maybe the guy will read the part about thou shalt not steal. And she wasn't hurt, but she was knocked down. And I talked to a police officer, and he said, Larry, we're down 300-400 officers. We cannot be around.
Wow.
And so people need to protect themselves.
Yeah, and I think maybe that is a cultural shift that will start to happen. I mean, weren't there the most gun sales that have ever been?
And the largest purchaser are females.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah, everyone should have a cute little pink gun.
Yeah, that's what Nancy Reagan said. I got a little pink gun, put a little pink bullet in your butt.
The last one I think is kind of boring, I guess, but are you familiar with the digital money and like all, of course, right? So of course, a lot of us here are into crypto, right? But we're also sort of gold bugs, silver bugs. One of the cool things about New Hampshire and what we're doing here is no one really knows what the right answer is, but what we know is that our own human action can help us figure that out. So people are starting businesses, smelting silver. We've got Porcupine branded stuff. We've got Goldbacks who are actually sponsoring part of this event. And now we're hearing all these rumblings of, the government now wants to get into the game. I heard that Bitcoin is coming in Britain in the next 12 months. I know there's a test case that's happening here in the States already. And so I think we're really looking at an accelerated problem that is staring us right. It's right there. So the central digital money. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, it's too close to all the names of my drugs. So it's hard to get the letters in the right order if you have slight dyslexia.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts and what can we do and how can we stop it?
People are concerned about AI, but they're ignoring this digital federal currency thing. It will enable the feds, the government, to attract what you buy, to influence what you buy, to stop things, to monitor what you buy. It's given an awful lot of power into the hands of the federal government. I'm opposed to it. By the way, we never should have gotten off the gold standard. And this fiat currency that you can just print and print and print, the so-called, what do they call it? Quantitative easing, thank you. What is that? It's a fancy word for printing.
Right.
And it's undermining the value of our currency. And the Fed's target is 2%. The target should be 0. There shouldn't be any inflation. And 2% compounded over a long time is a lot of money. It undermines the value of all our currency.
So we love hearing that. Let's brainstorm. I mean, maybe there's no right answer or whatever, but it's like, do we stop this by just making sure we educate enough people and we're talking about it? We obviously think it's things like adoption of cryptocurrencies, making sure you're actually keeping your own wallets, like there's a privacy issue. But then there's the gold standard, the silver standard, like looking at these different options. And of course, if you move to New Hampshire, we also barter, chickens, meat, eggs, all of that kind of stuff within a community, right? A little agorism. But do you have some thoughts on like we got to do something, so what do we do?
Well, I don't think people realize how corrosive the printing has been.
Yeah.
And it's caused inflation. I don't think people realize what it does to people on fixed incomes, educating people. But I also think you cannot have a government digital currency without legislation. And when it's on my desk, I will not sign it.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I think I kind of covered all the questions. Is there anything else you want folks to know before your big speech today? I always ask everyone to always come back and maybe consider moving or tell people about us.
Well, many of our problems that we talk about have to do with the size and scope of the federal government. I'm an Article 1, Section 8 guy. The Constitution set forth the small, limited duties and obligations of the federal government, and we have completely walked all over it. I was on Fox News some years ago, and I said, in 1900, at all three levels, federal, state, and local, government took less than 10% from the American people. Today, it takes about 32%. Yeah. I get a phone call from one of these fact-check organizations. Larry, you said today on Fox News that government in 1900 took less than 10% from the American people? Actually, it's 9%. Do you have a source? I said, no, I just pulled it out of my butt. Of course I have a source. And now you say it takes 32%. Do you have a source? I gave them a source. To their credit, they said I was right. They were gobsmacked that the government has gotten that much bigger. The Founding Fathers did not intend for there to be a Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. You can make whatever arguments you want, but didn't intend for there to be a FEMA. None of this stuff. All this stuff was left to the people and to the states. And we had years where we were doing 5% growth GDP, 6%, 7%. Now we get 3%, we think it's great. It's because the government has taken so much money from the American people and spent it inefficiently. Milton Friedman, one of my mentors, he signed the blurb, by the way, in one of my books.
And his son's here.
He said there are 4 ways of spending from the most efficient to the least efficient. The most efficient is when you spend your money on yourself. You get exactly what you want, barter the price what you want. Next is when you spend your money on somebody you care about, as when you're spending your money on a loved one. The other is when someone's spending their money on you, as when you are working for somebody, you have an expense account. You can't go crazy, otherwise you get fired. The least efficient, most wasteful is somebody else's money on somebody else. And that's what we're doing here.
Yep. That's right. Yeah.
So the only way to rein this in is to fix spending to a certain percentage of the GDP. I would argue 10%, with exception for war and for natural disaster. Otherwise, the word unsustainable to refer to the so-called entitlements that was used by Bill Clinton. Barack Obama used that word, but nobody does anything about it, because if you promise and run, say I'm going to do this and do this, you won't get elected. The other side is going to accuse you of not caring about the sick, not caring about the poor, not caring about the old. So the only way to do it is to force the politicians by law to limit spending. Lock them in a room, you don't come out until you reduce spending, and that way you can tell the voters, I'm sorry, the devil made me do it, please don't hurt me in the ballot box. Yeah. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen.
I love it. Thank you, thank you,
My
thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We don't have mics. Do we just want to do like maybe let's save it for the big session,
Yeah.
Q&A. I honestly, I actually have no idea how much time we have. I didn't have a time counter.
It's 1:47 right now.
Oh man, I got good.
You can 10 more minutes if you want it.
Oh, okay. Do you want to, I don't know if you need like downtime like me, you know, I gotta go fix my hair.
What's your actual opinion? I was kind of related to the first question. What's your opinion so far, and will you be staying here the remaining of Porcfest?
You know, I've gained 10 pounds just looking at this food. I was in Iowa at the state fair. Pork chop on a stick, bacon on a stick, butter on a stick. I gained 10 pounds, haven't been able to lose it. So I'm going to be here a little while longer. And I'll be here, of course, in and out for the next year, both Iowa and New Hampshire, because New Hampshire has the first primary, obviously. Iowa has the first contest. And if you're serious, you got to be here, and I'm serious. There are 99 counties in Iowa. They expect you to be in every single one of them, at least once. I've been in about 26 so far. I've got a few more left to go, so I'm going to be here in and out. You know, I went to college in New England. I went to college in Providence at Brown. So I love this area. I was just telling Carla, I would love to move here if you guys could do something about winter. You do something about winter, I'm here.
We'll crowdfund you a jacket.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, Lynn. Yeah.
Get a bunch more.
Thanks for considering my son. I just wanted you to know, since Carla brought up the non-aggression principle, and I'm not excusing a lot of things on Silk Road, I'm not defending it.
Right.
But it was based on the non-aggression principle of voluntary interaction, do no harm, no third party hurt.
Right.
There was no child porn because of that, nothing to do with pedophilia. There was no stolen property, etc. I don't even believe there were guns. There might have been a spin-off that happened.
Right.
But just wanted you to know that because you're going to, if you're looking into it, Ross is portrayed very inaccurately.
Who, by the way, was his lawyer?
The trial lawyer?
Yeah, his lawyer. Who represented him?
Well, the trial lawyer and appeals lawyer was Joshua Draytell out of New York.
Mm-hmm.
But he's had a Supreme Court lawyer, Cannon Shamagam,
Mm-hmm.
Williams and Connell, back there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Thought it was very important.
You know, this poor guy, he thought he was just setting up a marketplace.
Well,
Next thing you know, he's
very idealistic.
yeah.
Wanted people to have experience of free market. And make some mistakes and
Yeah.
be the first to say so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he's said, so now that he's been in prison,
Right.
that he's seen people's lives destroyed by drugs,
Right.
people he knows, that he would never do, facilitate that, and that he's gotten a lot of people in there off drugs.
Was he offered a deal, a plea deal?
No.
Mm-hmm.
No, it feels like it was blatantly to be made an example of. Like there were so many it was the first real real world adoption of crypto, right? It showed an actual use for Bitcoin and as a means of exchange, right, to be used. So I also think it's an example actually of how the state will use propaganda and PR where they bring these hard stories out and they hit you with a headline, right? They call it the big lie. What they did it with weapons of mass destruction. They actually did it with a photo of iron lungs with kids with polio. Like that was a staged photo. That one photo that everyone in this room has seen that relates to polio vaccines, that's propaganda. So if there are these things where you know this thing, so with Ross's case, everyone hears about the murder for hire, and then that shuts your inquiry down because you're like, oh, I don't want to support someone. But if you actually go look, it's not true. They lied. They made it up. He was never charged with it, and he was never convicted of it. And that's a really big deal because that's what you think you know. So you don't know anything about this case, and you have to believe that people are lying about it, and you're going to have to dig deeper.
Well, it's also similar to January 6th.
Yes.
What part of I want you to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard don't you understand?
Right.
And Brandon Strzok was there on January 6th at the Capitol building. He was on the end where there wasn't any violence. And he filmed something. He didn't realize violence was going on. So he goes home, posts it on social media, knock on the door, FBI, he gets arrested. And he ultimately pleads guilty to a bunch of charges he said he did not commit because he ran out of money for lawyers.
Yeah. It's a problem because there's no balance, there's no justice.
Meanwhile, we had 4 months worth of protests in the streets in the summer of 2020 after George Floyd. They didn't call that an insurrection.
No. Back there?
Yeah, to follow up on the January 6th thing, were you part of the January 6th political prisoners?
I'm looking at it on a case-by-case basis. There's some of them that actually committed damage and also broke the law, but a lot of them did not. And so on a case-by-case basis, I'll do that. Yeah.
All right, we're all done. My sound guy is giving me the you gotta shut up. So once again, a round of applause for our fabulous guest.
Thank you.